This is the Eiffel Tower after the apocalypse, its structure long decayed, and its pinnacle shattered by airplane collisions. Laurent, filled with anticipation, arrived at the base of the tower because he felt it was the closest place to his mother. He approached the Eiffel Tower once again, attempting to pinpoint the exact spot where his mother had taken a photo years ago. However, the growling ahead drew his attention. Slowly, Laurent reached the edge of a barricade, only to realize that he was now in a predicament. Zombies, catching the scent of a living being, toppled obstacles and rushed towards Laurent eagerly. Daryl, having narrowly escaped Caudron's pursuit, found himself falling into the sewer as a building on the rooftop collapsed. He rushed to look for an exit, but he didn't realize that several passages were chained up. When a large number of zombies followed him, Laurent's figure also appeared on the side. Daryl quickly called his name, but Laurent seemed to be deaf. The zombies around him were closing in on Laurent, but he just closed his eyes and started praying. Daryl's heart was burning with anxiety, but no matter how he shouted and tapped the chain, Laurent and the zombies seemed to be deaf. By now the zombies had surrounded Laurent. Daryl, desperate, used a flashlight to assess the situation. Unexpectedly, the zombie horde simply passed by Laurent without attacking him. Daryl looked at the scene in disbelief. Daryl called out to Laurent again, but Laurent just smiled and turned to follow the zombies. With no other choice, Daryl had to accept this surreal reality. However, at that moment, a strong sense of suffocation overwhelmed Daryl. He opened his eyes and realized he was deep underwater. A zombie was about to drag him away. Daryl drew his knife and stabbed upward, then struggled to swim to the surface. Upon seeing the gaping hole in the rooftop, Daryl understood that Laurent's earlier scene was just his own hallucination. On the other side, survivor camp leader Caudron couldn't find Daryl and saw clues from the camp residents. Although Caudron didn't receive any news about Daryl, he accidentally learned about Laurent's extraordinary status among these people. Janet walked out. She had heard rumors of this special boy and had only thought of Laurent as a joke, but the woman's reply surprised her. The woman firmly believed that Laurent could save everyone. Hearing this, Janet's expression suddenly changed because she realized that these people had developed their own faith, making them challenging to control. Janet then turned her gaze to a crying baby nearby, reaching out to pick up the infant, terrified that Janet might harm her child. The woman pleaded desperately. Surprisingly, Janet only cradled the baby in her arms and comforted the infant. Caudron instantly understood the implications. Janet wouldn't allow any hope to exist within her order. The hope of Laurent and the Union of Hope had to be eliminated to prevent any uprising. They had to find Laurent quickly and erase him. Meanwhile, Daryl emerged from the sewer, seeking Isabelle's help to find Laurent. However, having been to her place only once, he struggled to locate Isabelle's residence. Luckily, Antoine happened to pass by. From him, Daryl learned that Caudron's forces were currently hunting Laurent. Time was of the essence, and Antoine prepared to take Daryl to Isabelle's place. However, a sudden sound of a car approaching interrupted them. Daryl urgently signaled Antoine to hide, leaving the bicycle behind. They concealed themselves around the corner, but the car came after them. Just as he got off the bike, the man realized that there was a pigeon cage in the bike, which made him so happy that he could have a good meal in the evening. The man directly loaded the cage onto the car. Antoine was also anxious about how he could let them take away these pigeons, which were his treasures. Antoine desperately pleaded with them to spare the pigeons. However, the other party paid no heed. In the post-apocalyptic world, lives were far less valuable than food. The man didn't hesitate to shoot. While the man mocked, a dagger struck him fatally, causing him to die instantly. Subsequently, Daryl, wielding a hammer, dealt with the man's accomplice. However, upon inspecting Antoine's wounds, Daryl realized it was too late. Antoine, bleeding profusely, was still concerned about his pigeons. Daryl then moved the cage from the car and placed it in front of Antoine. Daryl helped Antoine fulfill his last wish to release all the pigeons. Watching the pigeons fly away, Antoine finally closed his eyes. Following Antoine's guidance, Daryl arrived at Isabelle's residence. Isabelle was indeed there. Upon seeing each other, Isabelle embraced Daryl, genuinely worried about his well-being. Their previous conflicts dissipated, and now all they wanted was to find Laurent. Isabelle mentioned that Laurent was unfamiliar with Paris, and she had searched all night without finding any trace of him. She couldn't figure out where Laurent might have gone. Suddenly, Daryl spoke up, suggesting a place they could try. When they reached the Eiffel Tower, they discovered Laurent, but a large gathering of zombies had already amassed. Isabelle and Daryl had to engage in hand-to-hand combat, swiftly dispatching one zombie after another, but the number of zombies is too many to kill. Lauron, who has no attacking power at all, hides under an iron plate for shelter, but a zombie still finds him. In the critical moment, a mysterious man suddenly appeared, swiftly dispatching the zombie before grabbing Laurent and making a dash for the car. Daryl, sensing something amiss, immediately gave chase, but there were 3 of them. Although they pulled down 2 of them, the last one still took Laurent and left the place. They had no choice but to go back with their captive. Isabelle began interrogating him. Since the man wore the emblem of a believer around his neck, Isabelle identified herself as a nun after offering some advice. However, even after her attempts to persuade him, the man remained tight-lipped. Initially suspecting him as one of Janet's henchmen, Isabelle only realized the truth when the man brought up her painful past. The person who abducted Laurent was none other than her ex-boyfriend, Quinn. Isabelle's speculation was accurate. Laurent was now in Quinn's basement. As Laurent's father, Quinn had no intention of harming him, expressing a desire to make up for the lost time. Meanwhile, Isabelle and Daryl sought to extract information from the man, but he responded with insults and offered no useful information. Daryl knew this wasn't the way to go and he immediately punched the man in the face, but he still wouldn't talk. Daryl punched the man 2 more times, but the man still wouldn't talk. Daryl picks up his bayonet and stabs the man in the body. The man finally speaks. Quinn is trying to use Laurent to get Isabelle. He wants to renew his relationship with Isabelle. Seeing progress, Isabelle continued questioning. Were there other ways to enter Quinn's bar directly? The man denied it. Daryl grabbed a longer and sharper steel pipe, waving it menacingly in front of the man. The man was scared. Knowing Daryl's temper, he said that there was a secret passage, but it was also dangerous, and he could draw a map to guide them. Daryl doesn't buy it. The only thing better than a map is a guide. Thus, they divided into 3 paths, Fallah's group attacking the front door, Daryl leading the man through the secret passage into the bar, and Isabelle and another nun heading to rendezvous with headquarters. With Janet's influence in Paris too significant, they had to evacuate Laurent immediately after his rescue. At this moment, Quinn took the initiative to arrange a meeting with Janet. Well aware that Daryl would undoubtedly come to rescue Laurent, he initiated discussions about seeking revenge. Quinn proposed offering a famous Monet painting as part of their deal, and Janet readily agreed. Janet was aware of Quinn's character, placing great importance on transactions. However, when Janet mentioned Laurent, Quinn evasively brushed it off, clearly intending to protect him. Meanwhile, Daryl arrived at the designated location with the captive, confirming the existence of a hidden passage. Thus, the 2 smoothly entered the interior of the bar. On the other side, Fallah's team reached the front door, and a fierce battle quickly ensued. The guards were strong. Fallah and his team could not attack for a long time, but they could only delay to buy Daryl a chance. At this moment, there are also movements coming from the tunnels. The terrain here was exceedingly intricate, accompanied by the echoing growls of zombies. The tunnels were like a maze. Luckily Daryl had his captive with him, otherwise Daryl would have had a hard time getting out even with a map. However, at a corner, the man played a trick, delivering a sudden punch when Daryl was off guard before swiftly escaping. Daryl immediately gave chase. At last the man stopped in a passage not far away. By this time his left leg was wounded, and if no one helped him he could only wait for death. Daryl interrogated him about the upcoming route, and the man, compelled by the strong instinct to survive, revealed the truth. The man thought Daryl would take him away.
A door?
Yes, a door, a door. Let's go. Let's go, let's go.
Bon appetit.
No.
And so the man is eaten by the zombies. Daryl successfully entered the bar's interior, encountering minimal resistance as most guards were concentrated at the front door. He quickly located Laurent's basement. At the same time, Laurent was engaged in a conversation with Anna. Despite being Quinn's subordinate, Anna harbored no ill intentions and did not obstruct their departure. Quinn, checking the situation at the front door, sensed something amiss. Realizing he had been deceived, he immediately returned to the basement. Quinn runs into Daryl, who is running away, and they get into a fight. However, Quinn was no match for Daryl, who quickly subdued him. Laurent watched on from the sidelines, a sense of discomfort evident on his face. While preparing to end Quinn with a knife, Daryl glanced at Laurent and ultimately abandoned the decision. On the other side, Fallah and his team had already withdrawn. Fallah informed Isabelle that Janet had begun amassing troops outside the city, preparing to set up a trap. They needed to escape quickly. Isabelle, anxiously concerned, was relieved when Daryl arrived with Laurent. Daryl urged them to leave promptly, but Isabelle revealed her inner decision to resist Janet's soldiers taking over the city. They needed someone capable, and Quinn was the best candidate. For Laurent's safe exit, They had to rely on Quinn's assistance. Isabelle knew Quinn desired her, and if she chose to stay, he would agree to help. The path ahead could only be navigated by Daryl, leading Lauron forward. Daryl strongly opposed Isabelle's staying behind, but lacking a foolproof plan, they reluctantly accepted Isabelle's arrangement. So Daryl and Lauron left on the boat, and Isabelle went to the pub alone. A distraught Quinn looks meaningfully at Isabelle in front of him,